enormous honor and a pleasure for me to get to speak with you for a few minutes today. I end up giving a lot of commencement addresses from time to time, and that's always fun, but giving a commencement address is a kind of strange talk. You're always well aware that you're the only thing standing between people and their diploma, and the sort of urge to get it over with very quickly. But in this case, I feel no such. We may be here a long time, and especially the chance to get to speak to students at the beginning, not the end, of their college careers is, for me, a great opportunity. So I want to say a few things. I want to begin by saying that you're very, very lucky to be here. You know that already, but I have a strong sense of it today for many reasons. One, just the simple beauty of this place. I've spent my life, back in the dark and gloomy East, and my mother would, with regular frequency, remark that in fact our nation had another coast, and on that other coast there was a kind of land of sunshine, and she would bring up her very happy days here at Whittier, and always, I think, pine a little bit for the fact that she followed my father back across the continent. And now I have some sense of what we missed. And here at this campus, some sense of the wonderful things underway. I had a really special lunch today with about 40 students, including the two here on the podium, the platform, who really were deeply involved in the kind of work that needs to be going on. And so that you've arrived one way or another at a campus that takes these sort of things seriously, that makes you lucky people. You're unlucky people too, in a different sense. Unlucky to be born and to grow up at what is in many ways a tough moment. Now, I'm not going to spend an immense amount of time going over and over and over the environmental troubles that we face. That's sort of what I do when I write. I'm afraid that in many ways my profession is to be a bummer outer for people, and I'm always cognizant of that. But it does pay every once in a while to remind ourselves what the biggest things going on around us in the world really are. The forces that will determine the shape of the world in your lifetime more than any other have to do with these physical changes now underway on the planet. Having written the first book on global warming 21 years ago, i.e. before you were born, I have gotten to watch the whole story unfold, and the unfolding has been difficult and unpleasant, because it's become clear that change in the planet's climate is coming much more quickly and on a much wider scale than we would have guessed even a couple of decades ago. So far, human beings have raised the temperature of the planet 1 degree. That doesn't sound like much, but it's been enough to knock most of our physical systems off kilter. I won't bother rehearsing the evidence for that. I'll just turn, I think, to the events of the last 120 days, because they provide a perfectly good example of what happens in the early stages of global warming. You had a fairly cool summer here in California, and you were almost the only place in the northern hemisphere that did. Statistically, this was the warmest summer on record. It comes at the end of the warmest 12 months on record and the warmest decade on record. 19 nations set new temperature records in the course of this summer, itself a record by a large margin. Some of those records were through the roof. We were on the phone with our colleagues at 350.org in Pakistan in late May or early June, and one of them remarked that it was very hot. And I was surprised to hear him say that, because it's often hot in Pakistan and people don't. He said, no, it's really hot today. We just set the all-time Asia temperature record today. I said, how hot did it get? Oh, it was 129 degrees today. So, you know, think about what it felt like a few weeks ago when LA hit 113, you know, and then add 15 degrees to that, and then for 98% of Pakistanis subtract all the air conditioning, and then have some sense of the kind of world that we're moving into. When you get heat like that, of course, it expresses itself in all kinds of ways. We saw dramatic continued melt across the Arctic this summer. Both the northwest and northeast passages were open. There was a yacht race this summer through places that even 10 years ago people thought no human would ever be able to navigate. Russia had such drought and heat that fires shrouded Moscow in smoke. More to the point, the Kremlin became so rattled by the reduction in their harvest that they ceased all grain export to the rest of the world. This from the world's third largest grain exporter. The price of wheat and corn immediately shot up about 70% in the last 3 months. There are places where people are going hungry tonight around the world as a result. Most dramatic was what happened in Pakistan. One of the simple facts of climate change is that warm air holds more water vapor than cold. As a result, the Earth's atmosphere on average is about 5% moister than it was 40 years ago. That loads the dice for deluge and downpour and flood. We see it now place after place after place. In this country this year, we've had fatal big floods in Nashville and Oklahoma City, along the Texas-Mexico border, in the upper Midwest. Wilmington, North Carolina just had its second 1,000-year storm in 11 years. Flooding in country after country, but no place that was quite as unlucky as Pakistan. There in the region up above the Khyber Pass, beginning on the 28th of July, a region that usually sees 3 feet of rain in a year, saw 12 feet of rain in a week. That water washed down the tributaries of the Indus River and then spread out across Pakistan for a month until someplace between 1/3 and 1/5 of the country was underwater, and as many as 7 million people were out of their homes. A tragedy of such large dimension, it's hard even to quite take it in. That's what the world feels like in the early stages of this kind of warming. And the tough news is that it may, almost certainly will, get very much worse than this, especially if we don't take action quickly. The climatologists tell us that we've already probably guaranteed another degree rise in temperature with carbon we've already emitted. The heat stored in the oceans for a little while, but not for that long. Moreover, they tell us that unless we move quickly to get off fossil fuel, very quickly, more quickly than it is economically or politically convenient, we will see the temperature rise 4 or 5 or 6 degrees in the course of this century. If 1 degree melts the Arctic, we do not wish to find out what 4 degrees will do. That's the world that we need to avoid. And it's a world that we need to avoid not only in a sense for physical reasons, but for moral ones. Because when we talk about the way that humans are raising the temperature, at one sense we are telling a lie. It is not all humans that are doing this. Those farmers along the Indus River in Pakistan, washed away in the course of this summer, they've done next to nothing to cause the trouble we now see. The amount of fossil fuel that they burn in the course of a year is negligible. The 4% of us in this country burn about 25% of the world's energy. And as a result, we're responsible for an enormous share of that heating now taking place. And so the onus is on us especially to act. So in that sense, unlucky. Put in another sense, lucky, because you have the opportunity to join with people all over the world in addressing this and other problems in a really fateful and dramatic time. And that's not a privilege extended always in human history. There are long, quiet eras in human history, but there are only a few moments when things of great moment are at stake, and to be alive in these times, at the very least, is an interesting challenge. You can do something about these things. I know that because in the last few years, we've started to show that it can be done, and by we, I mean me and other people as clueless about how to begin as I was just a few years ago. I work mostly with young people around the world, people your age, and I want to show you if I can get this technology to work, which is no guarantee. No guarantee you can get the computer to open. Somebody's 17 or, oh, here we go, good. 3 years ago, our foremost, I think I'm still in the right place, our foremost climatologist, Jim Hansen and his team at NASA, managed to provide us with the single most important number in the world. They were able to say that we now know enough about the global warming crisis to put a number on it. To say, as they did, that any value for carbon in the atmosphere greater than 350 parts per million is not compatible with the planet on which civilization developed, into which life on Earth is adapted. That number 350 instantly became the most important number in the world and one of the scariest, because we are already well beyond it. The air outside here today in California and in every place else in the world is about 390 parts per million CO2. We are already too high. That's why the Arctic melts, why Russia burns, why Pakistan drowns, why we need to move so quickly. The one good thing about that number 350 was it allowed us to begin to imagine how we might start to build a global movement. The trouble with movement building around the world, as we were discussing earlier, is the insistence of people around this planet on speaking their own languages. It makes it very difficult to communicate, but Arabic numerals jumped those fences. 350 meant the same thing everywhere, and so we found people, almost entirely young people, and set them to work figuring out how to take that number and make it profound, make it known, make it part of the kind of information bloodstream of the planet, to take hard natural science and make it part of our vocabulary. And all over the world people responded. Though we had no money and no organization really with which to do this work, it was only 7 college students and myself when we started out, 7 undergraduates from Middlebury, where I teach in Vermont. They were able to find people like them at colleges and schools and not in schools, and in churches and mosques and synagogues and in every other kind of place around the world. And beginning in October, as Professor Swift described, of 2009, we managed to pull off this very, very large day of action, a kind of day of science education in a way. That day, there were 5,200 demonstrations in 181 countries. What CNN said was the most widespread day of political action any place in the planet's history. I'm going to show you just a very few pictures. And as I flip through them, the things I want you to notice in particular are the diversity of the faces you will see and the youth of many of the faces that you will see. Those who still think that environmentalism is somehow a kind of luxury for affluent white people to think about once they've solved their other problems are wrong. Most of our colleagues in this work are poor, black, brown, Asian, and young, because that's what most of the world is made up of, and they are every bit, if not more, concerned about the future than we are. Those are American soldiers in Afghanistan. They made a 350 with sandbags, and they sent us a note saying we're parking our Humvee for the weekend. So we were very pleased. But all over the world, people acting with enormous interest and compassion and pride in showing that they understood the peril that we faced. Some of them were very creative. but all of them those are the leaders of Muslim and indigenous traditions in South Africa, and the Anglican Archbishop of South Africa at the head of a huge multi-faith march. That's Jordan and Palestine and Israel, people working together around the shores of the Dead Sea to make their case. Place, that's Syracuse football field with 100,000 people watching. Place after place after place around the world. It was a marvelous day. And I wish I could tell you that it had solved the problem that we face. It helped. A few weeks later, we were in Copenhagen for this grand UN summit on climate change. And there we had representatives from all over the world. The largest delegation came from us, from 350 young people from all over the planet. And they did a very good job lobbying all over their delegations. As a result, we managed to convince 117 of the world's nations to officially sign on to this 350 target. 117 was good. The bad part was that they weren't the 117 that we really needed. They were the poorest and most vulnerable nations on Earth, not the richest and most addicted, which, led by our own, were unable yet to come to terms with that addiction and do anything. And so that conference ended in great failure and great sadness and great despair. Those are electric golf carts, in case you're wondering. You see the world's diversity on display. That conference ended in failure. That's those 7 young people who did this work, delivering some of these photos to the UN. The conference ended in failure, but the kids who were there from around the world made it their business to let me know that there was no way that they or we were going to be allowed to back down or to stop. They said what needs to happen is we need to make this movement bigger and stronger, and so that is what we are doing. 3 weeks ago, we had this global work party, and it turned out to be even bigger. 7,400 events in 188 countries, only Equatorial Guinea and North Korea not taking part. Just magnificent, magnificent. I don't know what's happened to these pictures. I had some pictures of that day, but we won't worry about them. It was an amazing day. And it too won't solve this problem by itself, because we need to build a big movement, and we need to build it over the next few years until it's big enough to present the kind of challenge to the established order of business that will be required in order to make a change of this magnitude. So you're lucky to get to be a part of that. And in fact, you will have a chance right here in Los Angeles later this month. Devika and Amber and others will be able to tell you just where to go on November the 21st, when Los Angeles will be one of 20 sites of this vast art project that we're conducting in 20 places around the world. Huge designs by excellent artists executed in human bodies, thousands at a time, on snowfields or deserts or parks. So big that they'll be able to be seen from outer space, and indeed a satellite company has donated $500,000 in satellite time to take those pictures. The first global scale group show, hopefully a reminder to people of the fact, among other things, that we live on a planet. That just like Venus or Mars, we're a planet, and the composition of our atmosphere is determinant of what kind of planet it is. It's hard for us to remember that here in this cozy and familiar world, but it's a planet like any other, and hopefully using the arts will be one way to help remind us of that. There will be many other opportunities, big and small. Here on this campus in the next week or so, people will have the opportunity to sign a pledge that they won't be using plastic bottles or plastic bags in the future. I got to sign it earlier today, and I think it is an excellent idea and the kind of small daily reminder. It won't solve any problems by itself, but it will remind us of what's possible, and it will free students, having done that good work, to go on and think on a larger scale and take on these national and international problems that you all are equipped to handle, just like the people in those pictures that you saw. So lucky in that way. And unlucky in the sense that if you don't do it, no one else will do it for you. There is no white knight that's going to ride in and save this day. This will be something that happens either because the great mass of people on this world make it their business to make it happen, or it will not happen. Left to its own devices, the status quo will continue to heat this planet, and we will end up in a very sad and difficult place. So you're unlucky there. There's a burden on you, but you're lucky. Well, actually, forget it. Enough of this trope. Luck, in the end, has nothing to do with it whatsoever. Any more than people were lucky or unlucky to find themselves facing the rise of fascism in the time of the Second World War, or lucky or unlucky to find themselves in the moment of the Civil Rights Revolution in the 1960s. That's just where you are. This is the moment into which you come. The set of problems with which you are presented, your skills, as you develop them here at college, will become daily more equal to matching the scale of those problems. And as you get stronger and smarter and more competent and more equipped, we need you to go to work, not to wait far into the future until you've become prominent or well off or established or anything else. We need you involved from the beginning, right now, in dealing with the issues that we face. We need you to step up to it, in other words, and we need you to do it without any guarantee that you're going to win, because there is none. This isn't like, in that sense, the civil rights movement, where people knew that though it might take a very long time, in the end they would triumph. As Martin Luther King always said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. He knew that in the end they would triumph. The trouble is, the arc of the physical universe is short, and it bends toward heat. And if we do not solve this problem fairly quickly, we will not solve it. There is no guarantee. Only the guarantee implicit in the faces of those people that you saw, that around the world people will work as long and as hard as they can until the last minute in order to preserve the beauty and the meaning of this place that we've been born onto. It is a great privilege for me to get to be always a part of that effort. It's a great privilege now for me to be a part of this Whittier family and to know that y'all will be engaged in this work going forward. I look forward to joining you in the years ahead. Thank you very much.